everybody, it's Robbie and I'm in my garden today, and I've decided today to answer some questions on hummingbirds. I've had so many questions on hummingbirds. I've got some notes here on questions that people have asked. I want to go through this as quick as possible to keep this short. The recipe for hummingbirds is 1 part sugar, 4 parts water. The sugar must be white sugar. It can be sugar beet, it can be cane sugar, but either one, white sugar. As far as the water, if your water is drinkable and you have good city water, you can use that water. If it's not, then go ahead and use bottled. Brita, any of those filtered waters, whatever you want to do, either water. Now, the reason you can only use white sugar, so many questions on that. Hummingbirds feed on flower nectar. Flower nectar from your garden, from the flowers, is sucrose. That is the only type of sugar that hummingbirds can digest. That's the only thing that they know how to metabolize. So it's the closest thing to nectar, white sugar, and that's why white sugar is the only thing to be used. Don't compare hummingbirds to people. Hummingbirds aren't people. Hummingbirds are hummingbirds. So you want to use white sugar only. And again, the reason the ratio is picked 1 to 4 is the studies have shown that that concentration is as close as possible to the pollinated flowers and the nectar. That's why there's a ratio of 1 to 4. It's not just something that somebody came up with. It's been studied, the nectar. And it's the 1 to 4 that we use on the white sugar, 1 cup sugar to 4 cups water is closest thing to nectar that they feed on. To go a little bit higher in concentration with sugar isn't really going to harm them, but it's not needed. It's a waste. But to go lower and add in a small amount of sugar to the water, that can be harmful. And the reason that can be harmful is they will have to search more. They'll be feeding on that and searching more for food, and they'll be burning their energy trying to get the proper amount of food in their body. So it's best not to go lower. Now, honey and other sugars are mainly made out of fructose and glucose. Hummingbirds cannot digest either one of those sugars or any other type of sugar. They cannot digest fructose or glucose. Fructose will not metabolize in their body. So if you ended up using that, you will probably end up killing the bird, or anybody using that will kill the bird. They can only metabolize and digest sucrose. Artificial sweeteners have no calorie and no energy to give the birds. Another thing that's no good. Unrefined sugars. Cane sugar has iron, mineral salts, and other minerals that are not present in white sugar. And this is the reason you don't use unrefined sugar. They cannot metabolize all the mineral salts and the minerals in there. And I'm doing this because I've written this all down. I've done a lot of research and gone through the studies. And I want to make sure I get this right. They cannot metabolize the iron in there, the mineral salts, and the other minerals in there. So do not use unrefined sugar. Again, sucrose is the closest thing to flower nectar, and that's the only thing their bodies know how to digest. Brown sugar. Brown sugar has molasses. Molasses has iron and other minerals in it. Same problem. Do not use brown sugar. Don't use powdered sugar, because powdered sugar's got cornstarch in it. So stay away from powdered sugar. You know, the ones that you make frostings with and stuff. Don't use that. It's corn sugars. They contain dextrose and high fructose in it, and maltose sugar. I might not be pronouncing that right, maltose. That is not a natural source of sugar. Again, that will kill hummingbirds. Agave nectar. First of all, that would spoil real fast. If you put agave in your hummingbird feeders, you'll have more problems with spoilage than anything else, but it does not contain sucrose. So you want to stay away from that. Let me tell you a story on agave. I started hearing agave was so good. This was many years ago. It wasn't even that long ago, about 5 years ago. And I started using it in my coffee in the morning. So I was having about 2 teaspoons a day. And then a report came out, some of the doctors that I follow, that it raises your triglycerides. This is for people. So I went right away, since I had been using it for like 6 months, and I had my blood tested, and my tris went way up. I had never in my life had high tris. My triglycerides have been perfect. I told my doctor, got right off the agave, no more agave in my coffee, and went back for a blood test in 3 months, immediately went back to normal levels, and I've never had a problem since. So be easy with agave, but never give agave to hummingbirds. Now, the other question that comes up, the red dye. Everybody's screaming about the red dye. All the research through all the hummingbird societies that I have gone through and research on birds, that red dye does not, there's no proof in any way that it will be harmful to them. See, the problem is they put red dye in the hummingbird nectar that you can buy at your wild bird stores, order online. There's red dye in there, and then people were saying it's poisonous. It's actually costs a lot of money when you can do it yourself. The red dye, though, there's no scientific evidence at all that red dye is harmful to the birds. But with that said, I'm going to say do not use dye. You're wasting your money, you're wasting your time, and why even use something that is not needed? It's absolutely zero needed. The thing is, I think that people use it because hummingbirds are attracted to red, the color red. See my hummingbird feeder? Most of your hummingbird feeders you buy are red. If it's not red, get some paint and paint it. People have added on ribbons, fake flowers, red ribbons, red flowers. That will attract them too. It is the red color that attracts them, but you don't need it. See, my formula here is clear. You don't need it. It's the wrong time of the day. They've all fed and they're all sitting around watching me, so they're not really here right now. So just decorate your hummingbird feeder, or just buy hummingbird feeders that have red on them. That's usually the best way to go on that. And let's see, what else? Here's another one that people have been talking about. Calcium. Hummingbirds do need calcium for their bones. That is true. Keep in mind, when you see hummingbirds feeding from your feeder, they're not just feeding from your feeder all day. That's a small amount of their food. They're hunting all over for small insects, pollen, nectar. They're still hunting. As long as it's available, they're going to hunt for all that. They do eat insects. And spiders are their best friend. Spiders don't like hummingbirds, but hummingbirds like spiders. We always thought that they were collecting the web. We used to see them go in there, my husband and I, Gary and I. We thought they were collecting web to build their nest, but then we saw them doing it in the winter. So upon doing some research, what they're doing is they're robbing it. That's what they're doing. The hummingbirds have figured out that they can go to a spider web nest. There's many things they can get out of there. They can take out the carcass that the spider didn't eat, because the spiders only eat the inside of the insect. I really didn't want to get into this to upset anybody, but they only eat the soft part of the insect, and they leave the outer shell or any of the so-called bones, the skeleton part, and that's what the hummingbirds eat, and there's their calcium. The other thing is that when they encase extra insects in their web that they're not going to eat, the hummingbirds that know about that spider web will take that out. So they eat that too. And then they'll also pull out insects that got caught that they want to eat in there. Another thing you can do is I compost in place. I think a lot of you probably have seen my videos, and it does create fruit flies. I have actually gone up to my compost when I haven't planted in it yet. I'm standing in front of one. When I haven't planted in it yet, and a hummingbird will fly out at me because they've been hanging around in there collecting little insects. So you can really do a great service to hummingbirds if you were composting in place and creating small insects for them. Some people have said that in their area they were told to add calcium to their hummingbird nectar. I have never personally heard of that. I'm not saying it's wrong or it's not being told, at least in Southern California. I've never been told to add that. If somebody reputable is telling you to do this, I'm not just talking about you go to a pet store and they're telling you, oh, here, buy some calcium, give it to the hummingbird. Somebody reputable, the government is telling you in your county, then go ahead and listen to what they say and do what they say, and do it carefully and don't do more. When it comes to any type of vitamins, the right amount and less is better than the right amount and more. if you go more, and this includes people, but let's go back to hummingbirds. If you go more, too much calcium or too many minerals in there, you can blow their kidneys, is basically what you're going to do, because they're going to try to filter that out because their body doesn't want it, and they could end up going into kidney failure. So don't add in anything unless you were told specifically. I have never added in calcium because I know that our hummingbirds are going around the house, going into the eaves. You'll see them poking around in spider nests, and they're collecting more than enough. I mean, they're small, little tiny bones. They are collecting more than enough calcium in the insects. So that's pretty much it, all the questions I've got. A lot of people have told me that they started to get a whole lot of them, and then all of a sudden they disappeared, and what happened? A couple things can happen. You may have a whole group migrating through, and they'll stop by at your feeder, and it'll be full of hummingbirds. You know, I literally have stood here, and there's been like 100 of them. They were all over. They could have been migrating through, and then they'll stay for a couple days and go, and another group will come by, because they'll go all the way up the coast here in California, and they travel all across the United States. So it could be that. The other thing is, if you've got one feeder out, and that one feeder runs out, and they keep going to it and there's nothing there, of course they're going to hunt around, and they fly quick. They can go miles in minutes, just take off. And if they find one of your neighbors, and your neighbor could be miles away, that's got all kinds of hummingbird feeders out and all kinds of food, guess what? They just found a new home. They don't need to come back to you. So if you've got multiple hummingbirds showing up, what I would say is try to have at least 2 feeders, so there's always a little bit of food in one. And that would be another reason they would disappear. I want you to understand that when you see hummingbirds, and it looks like the same hummingbird, most of the time, if you're seeing that hummingbird within 15 minutes, it's not the same hummingbird. You may think it is, but it's probably not. A couple years ago, I haven't seen them, they haven't come back. We had a couple pieds. Pieds is when they have a different coloring to them, and these had white. One had white feathers, flights, and one was all speckled on the chest. You would see, and this is the time we figured out a lot of stuff. They would come feed, and they wouldn't come back for at least 15 minutes to 30 minutes. So when they left, they were off hunting, doing other things. So when you see a whole bunch of hummingbirds, like we're not quite at the evening yet, but as it gets closer to evening, they're all going to start coming in, and this feeder's going to be full, and all my other feeders are going to be full. When you see that many, it's literally, I have hundreds and hundreds of hummingbirds here. So they're coming in, they're feeding, and then they're leaving, and then other ones are coming in. And they wait their turns. They'll be waiting all over in my garden. They'll be in the tomato plants. They'll be sitting on the kale, my moringa tree. They'll be hanging around all over, and they're waiting for some to feed and then for them to take their spot. Try to get hummingbird feeders to have a little place for them to sit. This one did not, so I made my own little wire. I just got a little bit of electrical wire, twisted it around the flower and twisted it up, and it made themselves little seats, because when they come here, they like to sit. And yeah, it's fun, more fun, because otherwise they just hover and then take off. This way they sit, they look around, they enjoy themselves. So I hope I've answered a lot of your questions. Again, simple, simple, easy. You can bring hundreds of hummingbirds to your place by just putting out the formula that they like, which is I actually use 2 cups of white sugar, granulated white sugar, to 8 cups of water, and I make that twice a day, and I use a little, I've got a whole video on how I do it exactly. Maybe I'll put it on the end real quick, but you can use 1/4 of a cup, especially to start with, to a cup of water, and it's amazing how the sugar dissolves in that cup of water. It doesn't make too much extra volume. It actually becomes part of that 1 cup, and then that will last in your fridge, or just put a couple feeders out. I hope I've answered all your questions. If I haven't, feel free to ask. I'll do the research if I don't know it. And I love the hummingbirds. Keep in mind, once you start feeding them, you could end up with hundreds, because you'll end up with a whole bunch of feeders, hummingbird feeders, feeding, and then they'll end up having babies, and they can have 6 babies in one season. And then those babies are going to have babies, and those babies are, and then they'll all, this is their home, this is where their food is. You will end up with hundreds and possibly thousands of hummingbirds. Let's go in the kitchen and make that hummingbird food so you can see how quick and easy it is. Hi, it's Robbie. Now we're back in my kitchen and I'm going to make some hummingbird food out of white sugar and water. That's all it is white sugar and water, no chemicals, and that's why I like making my own instead of buying it. This is 1/4 cup of white sugar. This is 1 cup of very warm water. Magic! I'm going to take the warm water, look at this, slowly pour it in and stir it, and look at that. To the line, it measures 1 cup. There is science in that. I looked it up. I tried to find the term for it. But what's happening is sugar has got space and the water's got space. And the sugar molecules and the water molecules merge together and make one. So you're not going to end up with any more volume. You're actually going to end up with 1 cup. So by mixing in 1/4 cup of sugar to 1 cup of water, that's 1 to 4, that's all you have to remember to make hummingbird food, you're still going to end up with the same amount of liquid. So if you mix in 2 cups of sugar like I usually make to 8 cups of water, I still end up with a total amount of 8 cups. What can I say? But the sugar merges with the water, it becomes one, and the volume doesn't change. Magic. So with that, you've got hummingbird food. You don't need any dye. Just get a fancy feeder or a feeder that's got red on it. That's what I meant. Doesn't have to be fancy. They don't care what it looks like. But it should have a little bit of red somewhere on it, and you're good to go. And that's how easy it is, and it's cheap. It's cheap unless you don't end up with hundreds and hundreds, and then it starts costing you and you'll be looking for sugar on sale. So with that, I hope I've answered most of your questions. If I have not, please feel free to come back and ask more. And if I've got the answers, I'll try. And if I don't, I'll try to see if I can find it. And if I can't, well, I tried. So have a great day. Please like and subscribe. Hopefully you get a thumbs up. And that's it. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. And I'm going to go make some zucchini bread now. It's really cake. Have a great day. Bye-bye, everybody.